Hello everyone. Today's video will be Understanding Serial Killers 101. I'll cover the basics about serial killers and the research I've done about them over the years. See, as you probably know already, serial killers usually have a type of victim. Ted Bundy, for example, targeted college co-eds and high school students. John Wayne Gacy targeted young men and boys, as did Dean Corll and Jeffrey Dahmer. And so it's often said that, and for example, Pedro Alonso Lopez liked little girls, and Andre Chikatilo liked, women, young boys, and young girls. Sometimes some are more specific, some are less specific, but they generally have a type of victim that has a certain profile. And contrary to popular belief, they are not all white males. For example, Andrea Lena Warnos was a woman and she killed 9 men. There was also Richard Ramirez. He was Hispanic. He killed about 14 people, if I remember correctly. And Moses Tole in South Africa, he killed dozens. And he was black. Anyway, and of course there's the DC Sniper, who is also black. I generally have, for example, that there was a thing that I made up called hunters and trappers. A hunter is somebody like a DC Sniper, a Richard who shot people from a distance, or a Richard Ramirez who broke into people's houses and killed them. And of course there are trappers, such as Jeffrey Dahmer, who lured people back into his house and killed them, as did John Wayne Gacy and Dean Corll. And there's also, people, and the Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, the ones that pick up prostitutes and then kill them in an undisclosed location. Those are trappers. And sometimes, although rarely, someone can combine the two, but that's pretty rare. Like Ted Bundy, he would, in the beginning and at the end, he would break into women's houses and kill them, and take their bodies with him, most of the time, usually. And he would also lure women away to a secluded spot where he would kill them, so he kind of fit both categories there. Not only that, there are what's known as organized serial killers and disorganized serial killers. Organized serial killers would be, Ted Bundy, up until until his first attempted, at least unless you count his first attempted murder, and the Chi Omega killings, in which he killed 2 women and severely injured 3 more. He organized people, organized ones, they plan. They have a method for killing, disposal of the body, things like that, so they won't get caught. Disorganized serial killers are ones and they usually have high intelligence, that sort of stuff. And John Wayne Gacy would be a organized serial killer, as would Dean Corll. Disorganized serial killers are like Richard Ramirez, Elena Warnos, those sorts of things. And they typically have low intelligence. They don't plan their crimes all that well, if at all. They're impulsive. Basically, you might want to think of it as organized versus disorganized, to like a cold heart versus a hot head. And anyway, I also research is like, and a lot of times, and yes, a lot of times there is sexual motives within these crimes, like such as Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Dean Corll, Gary Ridgway, Arthur Shawcross, Pedro Alonso Lopez, and Moses Satole, Andre Chikatilo. The list of sexually perverse ones just goes on and on and on and on. And you will find that a lot of these monsters of ancient legends, such as vampires and werewolves, blah, 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 those were made to basically explain serial killers, that sort of thing. Because serial killers have been around since there have been humans, but we often until recently did not want to acknowledge their existence. And anyway, there was also a case where one thing you got to know about serial killers is that they rarely use a gun. They sometimes do, such as the DC Sniper, David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, or the Zodiac Killer. And Richard Ramirez would occasionally use a gun. He would use knives and blunt instruments as well. That being said, guns are too impersonal for them. They typically usually like it up close and personal, because that's where they get the biggest rush. And they love the power that they feel taking another life. It's, as I said in my earlier video, a serial killer, a spree killer, kills the whole world at once. A serial killer kills the same person again and again and again, as I said in my Understanding Spree Killers videos. See, another myth is that they're loners. Now, that can be true with, like, Jeffrey Dahmer, for example. He was a loner. So was the son of Sam, and all that stuff. And what we find is that that's rarely true, because, you know, Ted Bundy had an avid social life. So did John Wayne Gacy. Yeah, the list goes on, and BTK especially. I mean, the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, he had a pretty elaborate social life and often got into some fairly important positions in his community. He was like dog catcher, and he was pretty psychopathic there too. And he was an ass, basically. And not only that, we often think of serial killers as moving from state to state to state and across vast expanses of land killing people. They very rarely do that. They usually stay in one area. In fact, they often don't stray far from where they live. Rarely do they do that. Ted Bundy was a notable exception. He went all the way from the Pacific Northwest and took his killing spree all the way to Florida. And there's also evidence that Jack the Ripper left London and started a new life here in America. That being said, as far as Jack the Ripper, as far as that sort of thing goes, people often like to think of these serial killers as monsters, as just these evil psych beings who are nothing like who can't live like a normal person. But the scary thing is that they can. They're often fathers. They often have girlfriends and wives. They have children. They are devoted family men, and some of them have some pretty good jobs, high paying jobs too. And that to me is very frightening, because you don't know, it makes you look at the world a lot differently, because you don't know who you could be dealing with in reality. I mean, if you leave with nothing else, leave with this. Anybody can be a serial killer. I mean, it could be the guy next door. It could be, the guy who brings you your mail. It could be, the waiter or the busboy at the restaurant. It could be a cop. It could be a fireman. It could be your mayor. It could be your boss. It could be one of your employees. It can be a volunteer at a homeless shelter. And it's anybody. It could be anybody. And it's usually the one you least expect it, because psychopaths and sociopaths usually wear masks of normalcy, and they seem very normal, like somebody you'd never expect could do this shit. And they're out being sick, twisted motherfuckers, and you won't have a clue until they're caught. Another thing that's important to understand is that serial killers very rarely just stop on their own. It's happened before, like with BTK, but they typically don't stop until something stops them, i.e. they're caught, or sometimes they die. And the reality is that they are very good at hiding. And what happens is that they typically don't just stop on their own, but sometimes they do, like BTK, for example. He stopped on his own, although he was eventually caught, and he seemed to be trying to get caught. And, you can check a whole bunch of stuff, read up more about serial killers if you want. There's a lot more information than I mentioned here, and there's a lot more to learn than I mentioned here. This is just understanding the basics about serial killers. And there is no cookie cutter serial killer. There isn't. They typically have a type, but there are certain rules that are about serial killers, but there are always exceptions, always. Like my rule about saying serial killers generally have a type. Richard Ramirez was killing everyone, as was the DC sniper. And I could just go on and on and on about this. I'll probably make another video about this topic in the future. But anyway, like, comment, share, subscribe. This will conclude my video. And if you can, leave a donation. It's for a good cause. I'll be back with more morbid stuff later. See y'all.